Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you come back for the next episode covering the points of this conversation.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding @Prestigious_Pod.
Follow me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
Follow me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
Join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions.
And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, on one of my social media platforms, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousInitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website.
This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by a remarkable guest, Mr. Jeff Barnes, a former U.S. Navy nuclear power plant operator, Navy diver, and expert in risk management, technology, and business growth. With a rich background spanning the military, corporate America, and entrepreneurship, Jeff brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to our conversation. Jeff, hey, thanks for being with us here today.
Thanks so much for having me here, gentlemen.
So I guess, Jeff, with such a flavored background, can you give us a little bit more about who you are today, as you know, all of those things combined into who you are?
Yeah, that's one of those things that's always a little bit challenging to explain to people. My road has been very windy and twisty, as I'm sure most business owners, entrepreneurs, and most people in general is. But today, what I do is I run a company called Angel Investors Network, and we are a network of investors where we invest in, partner with, and acquire companies to help them scale. I own a marketing agency for the helping to scale part of things. And I sit on the boards of a number of companies. I'm an advisor for a number of companies, and my core focus is really helping those entrepreneurs, founders build wealth long term and eventually take some money off the table after all those hard years of work that they put in.
Wow, you seem to have a full calendar of different diverse things that you're doing.
I do. After over 2 decades of experience, and like I said, very windy road, learning a whole bunch of things. I find that what I do is I dive into things very deeply. I learn things really well, and then I become somewhat of an expert in certain fields. And over the course of time, that's helped me to advise and mentor a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and folks that are doing things. And so I'm one of those guys that once something comes to my attention that needs to be fixed, then if I can't figure out how to fix it, I'm not necessarily the person that's just going to go find somebody else to do it. I really like to learn how to fix a problem or solve a problem.
Wow. So, Jeff, with a journey that started in the Navy on the submarine, I'm curious, how has your military experience helped to shape your leadership style, especially in high pressure situations?
Yeah, I like that question. Thank you. So, the big thing I'd say for military leadership is that maybe contrary to a lot of popular belief, the military doesn't teach you leadership per se, right? Like there's no course that you go to initially and say, hey, here's how you lead people and all that. It's really trial by fire, right? And it's seeing how other people are doing it and learning. And then, of course, along the way, you learn some of those disciplines yourself. You take some of the skills you like and discard the other ones you don't. And over time, you become the leader that you are recognized as by your peers and followers. But you leave the military world, and that all changes dramatically, right? Civilians, as they're called when you're in the military, they don't understand what you do. They definitely don't understand, especially, coming from a submariner. Submarine, at least back when I was in, it was all guys, right? So you had 130 guys you lived with, you worked with, you knew them inside and out. And for anyone who's been in a similar environment, whether that's a high performance sales or not sales team, but a high performance sports team or, any of the other military branches, you guys can relate, which is guys have a different way of dealing with problems than a lot of people do, especially in mixed company. And so as a result, the leadership style that you learn in an all male society does not easily translate into the broader society. So what I learned was how to temper expectations. And that's something I'm still learning, right? Because when you run a nuclear power plant, you're on a submarine, your expectations are, we do everything we can to make sure everything runs properly, perfectly every time. Otherwise, people could die. And so tempering expectations with those people who are your followers that you're attempting to lead or manage, you need to make sure you keep that in mind. And then the second one is communication, right? A lot of people receive communication very differently than we might like to give it. And I think that most of the problems, whether it's in a relationship or in business or in life in general, comes down to miscommunication. And that's not even so much what I said is not what I meant, more so, well, how you said it made me tune out the message and instead focus on your emotional charged reaction to whatever was going on. And so a lot of people will miss out on the message because of the energy, the emotion, whatever it is. And when you're in a military high pressure situation, like you're referring to, it's life or death, right? In certain cases, like we actually had a situation where our boat, submarines designed to sink, but it's only designed to sink when you want it to. And there were a couple of times it started sinking when we didn't want it to. And then when that happens and the boat is, going down at a 20-degree reverse angle, you don't really like that too much because the propeller is supposed to be going and pushing you forward and up towards the surface, not letting you sink faster and deeper. In situations like that, there's no time for messing around and being nice to people and worrying about their feelings, right? You get the job done come hell or high water. And if you don't, it will be hell, right? It's going to be miserable. And you cannot take that same approach in most of civilian life because it's not life or death situations, even though a lot of people might like to believe it is, right? We all have this urgency to everything we're doing. And so we have to remember to temper that as well.
Yeah, and I can imagine that those high pressure situations that you were in the Navy are different than the high pressure type of situations that you're in now. But I would imagine that the foundation that you gained being in those really high stressful, high pressure situations greatly aids in the calmness that I'm sure you can bring to the high pressure situations in the corporate realm.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're under a gun, almost literally in some cases, then you learn how to cope with that stress and that pressure. And most people never have an experience throughout their life where they actually have to endure that once, let alone several times. And so the more that you are enduring those really high pressure, intense situations where things need to get done and they need to get done properly, you get to this point where a lot of other things become easy. And when those other things become easy to you, you tend to think that everybody else finds them easy, and they don't. And they also probably don't have the same level of expectation that you might have of completing a task. So when you get to this situation where it's like, okay, hey, we have this marketing initiative. We need to get this done today. We need to have 15 reviews and approvals done within the next 24 hours. That becomes a really high priority for some people. And you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's like, okay, well, yeah, it would be nice to have that, but is that reality? And if it doesn't happen, what's the worst that could possibly happen, right? And that's generally the way I tend to look at things. What's the worst that could happen? And clients of ours, the worst that could happen in their mind is everything goes south and they lose everything and it all falls apart, right? We all know that's not really the case. The sun will rise another day and things will move on. However, there are times when you have to say, okay, this needs to get done and we do need to push forward. But keeping it calm, cool, and collected and keeping your wits about you, especially when you're in a leadership position, is really, really important.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine being in a leadership position in those, type of that business type of pressure situation. And if you start to lose your cool, then that'll funnel down, and everybody below you, everybody that you're interacting with will feel that pressure, and it'll be amplified by them because they don't actually know all the moving parts that are involved like you do. And so I'm sure trying to temper that, and you talked about managing expectations. I think part of managing expectations is how you bring yourself, the type of level, per se, if you're way off level, really high, overwhelmed, then that will be conveyed by them. So being able to temper your expectations, your expectations in regard to how you are presenting the information, but also to let everybody else know, hey, listen, if this doesn't happen today, it's not the end of the world. Tomorrow, like you said, tomorrow is going to rise. You have another opportunity to do it tomorrow. It doesn't necessarily have to get done today. It may feel like it, but it doesn't have to in the grand scheme of things. And so trying to balance all of that, I'm sure it can be a challenge.
It is a challenge because one of the things you generally don't want to say is, hey, it's okay if we don't get this done if it's like a really important initiative, right? Because especially with underlings, for lack of a better term, if they start to see a culture where it's okay if we just miss deadlines and things like that, then they will continue to miss deadlines. And we don't want to hold that. We need to hold people to really high standards. However, what I will say that the military does, in my estimation, better than practically anyone else on this planet is plan, right? A submarine is planning to go on a mission for more than 12 months before it ever does. When we went through a shipyard period, the shipyard period was 18 months long. They were planning for several years before that began. And when that happens, we have a saying in the military, we call it the 7 P's. Piss poor planning prevents proper performance, right? And when you find yourself in a very high pressure situation where things need to get done immediately, what ends up, if you were to sit back and critique it, then you will realize, well, what happened was we didn't plan properly on the front end, right? And that's ultimately where the situation comes into. So when I am working with a team and I have conversations like this regularly, I say, listen, guys, this still needs to get done. We need to get things moving quickly and we need to be thorough about it. We're not going to cut any corners. Let's keep pushing. Let's get this done. And, if we need to work extra shifts, we'll do that. But then you go back to the person who was ultimately responsible and say, hey, I don't like this. You don't like this. None of us like being under this pressure right now. We need to solve this problem going forward so that this doesn't continue to happen. And I think that's where a lot of business owners especially find that frustration, is that they're always in this. I think it was Stephen Covey's, 4 quadrant. They're always in the urgent and important quadrant, right? Everything's urgent. Everything's important. Versus let's focus on the important things that are not urgent right now before they become urgent. And coaching our clients, even whether that's an entrepreneur raising capital, whether that's a company looking to exit or a company looking to scale, coaching them on that one key thing in and of itself is a really big takeaway for a lot of them, because they've never really planned that far in advance. A lot of the people I work with are ready, fire, 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 fire. Who else is aiming? Is anybody aiming? No one's aiming. Okay, we'll just keep going, right? Like that's kind of the people I work with. They know in their mind what's going on, but no one else around them does. And so if you don't have a plan that everybody else understands, it's no plan at all.
Well, and I think likely the troubling part of planning out and trying and having that plan fail is not being able to estimate obstacles when they happen. And then because you can't think about what an obstacle might be, there's no plan of action for if or when that obstacle would happen. Now, maybe, you plan for 10 obstacles and only 5 of them happen, but if you plan for 5 obstacles that might happen, that might be a potential outcome, and you have a way around those, and maybe that way around them doesn't work exactly, but at least if you have that idea that you can think out before it happens, before the rubber meets the road, so to say, that is huge, and be able to deal with those obstacles when they happen. Because if you think, I'm going to lay this plan out and it's going to work the first time, no problems, there's no way that happens. It almost never happens that way. There's going to be problems that come up. And if you don't think about some potential problems and ways to overcome them, then you're stuck in the sand when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Contingency planning is huge. We used to do that a lot with our corporate level clients when I was working in a large company. And contingency planning and redundancies in all these different things are very important. And to use a sports analogy, every National Football League team and player wants to go and win the Super Bowl, right? But they always find themselves in a situation that they didn't anticipate, they didn't expect. And what do? They course correct. They don't just sit there and say, okay, well, that was a bummer. I guess we'll just, chalk it up and, we'll come back next game, even though there's still a second half to play. No, they course correct. They're sitting there on the sidelines. They're talking to the coaches. They're talking to the guys in the booth. They're saying, okay, well, this guy is covering this guy even better, or they're double teaming this one, so we need to shift the focus or whatever it is, right? And contingency planning at a very high level, whether it's professional sports, whether it's the military, whether it's a company that's going public, for example, and they have to meet deadlines and review and audit requirements. Being able to shift on a dime is really, really important. But the big thing is you're always moving towards the same goal, right? So your tactics may change, your strategy is generally consistent, but you're always moving towards the same goal.
Yeah, and as you're talking about that, I can imagine if you are laying the plan out and you don't think about those potential obstacles, that contingency planning that you're talking about, and something happens or comes up, you pivot and move, and that very likely will move you away from the ultimate goal that you were striving for to begin with. And so as you're doing the contingency planning, it's important to keep that end goal in mind so that whatever the obstacle happens and the way that you maneuver around it still lines up with getting you to the end goal that you want.
Yeah, it's vital, right? Because you'll see a lot of people throughout life that are not successful, even though they might be very smart, they might be very ambitious, they might be motivated, they might be really, really hardworking, right? But they keep moving the goalpost, right? they keep changing the direction. And I was like this too, right? I'm like, okay, I want to do this. No, maybe I want to do that. And when you get to be a jack of all trades, you get to a point where like, I don't know which one I should choose, right? And so as a result of that, you end up moving the goalpost, and it takes a lot longer to achieve success if it ever happens. And I'd say that for a lot of people that do that, they feel like they're always moving, they're always in momentum, but they're never making progress, right? They're always doing something and they always feel busy, but they're never really getting that much closer to where they want to go. And so this is where, again, planning is really important. You figure out where your goal is, where do you want to go, right? That old analogy of if I told you to go from Los Angeles to New York City, but you didn't have a map and you didn't know where that endpoint actually was, how would you get there? Right. So knowing where you want to go, then building the map, and then realizing there's going to be detours along the way. Okay. And being able to adjust to those detours, but still say, hey, our goal is still to get here at this time.
Yeah, I think, yeah, wow. And I would imagine that part of it is not only just looking forward, but being able to look back and see the things that worked for you in the past and continue doing them and see where, like after you deal with the immediate obstacle that's right in your way that you have to deal with something, otherwise nothing's going to happen. Once you get past that, okay, let's retract, let's look back and think, okay, how did this happen? How did this come up and I didn't see it? How did I not expect it? So that your continual future planning can incorporate those potentialities so that that doesn't happen, or something like that doesn't happen again in the future.
It's vital, right? So in the military, we would do these things called critiques, and no one ever liked being a part of a critique because it gets written up and then it gets shared and disseminated with everybody in the entire fleet. And it's a black eye for the captain generally, or the engineer, or whoever was involved in it. And sometimes it can mean removal of the leadership, right? Even though the leader didn't have anything to do with the problem necessarily, but hey, this is the penalty. You're in charge. Your ship didn't run right. Your boat didn't run right. You're the one that needs to get fired, right? Not everybody else. Not everybody else that was involved probably getting some sort of reprimand. But they're not getting fired necessarily. So the thing that's really important to remember about that, Chris, is that the person who can overcome and fix the problem in the heat of the moment is not necessarily the best person to then also sit down and critique what went wrong in the first place. And they're also not necessarily the best person to figure out how to fix it going forward so it doesn't happen, right? Because there's very different types of leadership styles. There's these people that are head in the cloud, visionary, let's figure out where we want to go, love what we're doing. Okay, yeah, that didn't work. I don't know why that didn't work. I told you guys what I wanted to get done. Why didn't it get done? But hey, we got to move on. We got to move forward. But to fix that, right, you have to have somebody on your team who is really good at documenting, who's really good at taking notes, who's really good at figuring out what the process was. Like it's a project manager, it's an operations manager, it's a COO, it's something like that. They can say, okay, here's where we're going. We ran into this hiccup. We have a roadblock. What can we do to fix that so that this roadblock doesn't keep coming up and rearing its ugly head?
Yeah, and I'm sure for the manager, for the leadership, one of the challenging things is trying to figure out where to place everybody so that they're in the role that best suits the team, and so that that person can be fulfilled in doing the things that they want or are best at.
Honestly, I'd say the most important role of a leader, and admittedly the hardest as well, because we all know at any level, right? The Olympic coach doesn't run the race for the athlete, right? But they get them to the starting blocks. And a lot of us, when we're in a leadership role, first off, most people don't say, I want to go be a leader. I want to go be in charge. What a lot of us say is, I don't want a boss, right? I want to be in control of my destiny. And with that comes a massive amount of responsibility that most people completely glaze over until they get into it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is actually a lot of work. And all of a sudden, if you want to continue down that path and you want that goal of freedom, autonomy, your self-fulfilling life, whatever that might be, then other people are going to gravitate towards you eventually, and you're going to need them to, because you're going to need their support to make these things happen. But now you have this other problem, right? You got to this point where you were really good at doing this thing that got you on the right track. But now if I want to grow this thing, I want to make it bigger, I want to expand, I need other people to support me. Well, how do I understand the qualities and characteristics of that person who can support me so I can still continue to do what I need to do to be successful instead of babysitting them and managing them? And that's a real challenge of leadership. And this is why Gino Wickman talks about it in Traction. You generally have that integrator person, that person who is working with the visionary to help integrate all of those ideas into the process of the functions of the business to help it grow. Leaders, on the other hand, well, I shouldn't say leaders. Leaders who are good are really good at figuring that out. Visionaries who are entrepreneurs who are not necessarily leaders struggle with that, right? And so that's why we don't see a lot of the Elon Musk of the world or the Jeff Bezos of the world, the people that started a company and stayed with it through its rise into the meteoric heights.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, well said. Now, I'm curious. You founded your digital evolution marketing group, and that was your as you ventured into entrepreneurship. I'm curious. Can you share some insights into your digital strategies and how they have contributed to your success?
Yeah, so marketing was something I learned. I started learning back in '06 because I needed to learn it, right? I had these skill sets and I didn't know how in the world to attract people to me to leverage those skill sets and make money doing it. And so I started learning marketing a long time ago and have been an avid student of that ever since. But I never learned it to teach other people. I always said, I don't want to go learn marketing so I can become a marketer, so I can market to other marketers, so they can market to other marketers, right? Like that's this incestuous pool that we see out there, right? Somebody learns something, they get just good enough at learning it, they want to go teach to somebody else so then they can go implement it because it's too hard to implement it themselves. And so my process of learning marketing was really for me and for my businesses. And then as Angel Investors Network was growing and we're getting all these clients coming in, we're helping them raising capital or we're helping them finding investors, it always came back down to marketing. They don't know how to attract investor leads. They don't know how to convert those investor leads. They don't know how to, gather contact information, anything like that. And so we said, okay, we need to spin this out because AIN is not a marketing agency. So we spun it out. We started up Digital Evolution. And it's the same process, right? And I call it the Atlas method. The Atlas method is, really focused on this idea that we all know people don't do business with anyone they don't know, like, and trust. An impulse buy is not the way that you can grow a business, right? Unless you are just selling tchotchkes, which, I did $17 million doing that, but it still wasn't a fun business. It was a lot of work and a nightmare. But the Atlas method is you got to start with awareness, right? So us here on this podcast, this is part of awareness. None of us are necessarily expecting somebody to pick up the phone and call us and offer us $1 million contract after this podcast, right? Be great if it happened. Unlikely, right? But people need to see that you're out there. They need to see the brand. This is why those big brands are always on billboards, they're on TV everywhere. There's no call to action for Pepsi, right? When was the last time you saw a call to action for Coke or anything like that? You don't see it. That's awareness. We need to make sure everybody knows we exist. If no one knows you exist, they're not going to do business with you. The second is traffic, right? That traffic is, okay, you have the business on Main Street. That's great. People see the signs, they're walking by, but are they coming in the door? And once they come in the door, the next thing is you need to turn them into a lead. You need to capture contact information, start that actual trust building process with them, building that relationship. Once they become a lead, then we're going to get them to take an action, right? We want them to consume information from us. We want them to maybe do the free thing. Like we use lead magnets a lot of the time, whether that's a video, a PDF, a workshop, a webinar, doesn't really matter. It's however your ideal people want to consume information from you so that you build that credibility and trust factor high enough where you get the final thing, which is a sale, right? And the sale, it doesn't end with a sale, of course. The sale is really the first piece, right? You get a sale so that you can get a customer, right? And as a result of that sale, you now have this obligation it's a fiduciary responsibility, fulfill on your obligation, right? Make sure that they're happy with that. But then on the back end, continue to build that relationship, right? So you can continue growing that customer lifetime value over time. So again, it's all about awareness, traffic, leads, get an action, and then ultimately getting that sale, and then continue to build your tribe after that.
Well, and I think likely one of the things of all of that, one of the things I think that most people fail on is they stop at the sale. They think, okay, yep, I got the sale, I won, game's over. But you're absolutely right. Once that sale happens, that just means that you have an opportunity to build a rapport with that customer. What can you do to build them into your tribe, like you said, and how can you foster that connection to them so they can continue coming back to you for more information? Maybe it's not even more sales initially. Maybe it's just more free stuff, or maybe they are telling their friends about you, and then that in turn and then that next person can start the whole process. But I think that, like you said, that is where most people they think, okay, got the sale, game's over. Well, it's not the game's over. You just move to the next level now, but there's still more that you have to do, and figuring out how to navigate that effectively will really be what tells how the business is going to grow and expand or stay stagnant.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best thing, like in the world that I'm in, it's all professional services, right? I don't make widgets or tchotchkes and sell them on e-commerce. We have a lot of clients that do, but my focus is on building relationships, right? Because when we've got a client, right, and we have a marketing agency, right, so our clients are paying anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 a month to work with us, right, and then advertising on top of that. And so you don't keep clients like that that are spending 6, 7 figures with you without continuously keeping them happy, right? And I think this is a big failing. A lot of people are looking for that next sale, that next sale. And the challenge with that is it means you might be taking your attention off of the people who just gave you their trust, right? They bought into your idea. And it doesn't matter if you're doing, a $500,000 contract with a company or you're selling something for $50, right? Somebody put their trust in you, your product, your service, your technology. And if you just hope they're going to figure it out and hope that they're going to stick around, you're kidding yourself, right? Because there's always somebody else, knocking at the door trying to win that business away from you. So having that and building that relationship is vital to the long-term success of your company. And I think where a lot of successful entrepreneurs struggle with that transition from entrepreneur to CEO to eventually scaling up to a 9-figure valuation and beyond is that they don't know how to take that process that they might have started early on and translate that into a system that can be replicated by other people within the company. And so that's a lot of what we help with the scaling side of things too.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as you're talking about that, is that essentially that would be like an onboarding process? So once the person becomes, a client for you, especially in a service type business, then you have an onboarding process that gets them to figure out what the next steps are, how to interact with you and your team, and what to do with the information that they're gaining, and how they can better implement those things so that they can succeed, and in turn, you, the business, can succeed.
Onboarding is vital, right? So if you're in a tech company of any kind, having an onboarding process is absolutely vital. However, the number one reason that people stop doing business with any brand, I think most people wouldn't even believe this, but it's apathy, right? It is because they feel like they have been left in the dark and ignored by their brand, right? They're like, they don't really seem to care about me, so I'm moving on. They could be going to the same auto shop for years, right? And all of a sudden somebody changes, maybe the mechanic changes, maybe it was the front desk person who was always greeting them the best way and being really excited about it. And that person left and the new person doesn't greet them the same way. They're like, they just don't seem to care about me anymore. That's why people leave brands. And so whereas onboarding is good for maybe the first 90 days, it's not going to keep them around for 9 years, right? And the reason that the big brands succeed is because they have this customer retention process in place. I was doing work with a multinational $55 billion company, and we had a lot of money and a lot of clients, and we could walk in the door of practically any Fortune 500 C-suite and have conversations with them. However, and we did regularly. And the reason we did that was to keep those relationships. But when you stop doing that because you're like, this client's more important than this one, right? Then the smaller one, whether they're smaller or whatever, they eventually feel like you're neglecting them, right? And so as a result, they will leave. So we actually had teams of people, and it was their only job was account management. Their only job was to check in at least once a month with the decision makers of these big companies. Not for any sale, not for anything other than, hey, just want to let you know that we're still here. If there's any question, anything I can help you with, take them out to coffee. And this is why I grew up in the engineering world and the operations field, and I was just so mad when I heard what the budgets were for the salespeople, right? I was just like blown away, so frustrated by this, indignant. Here we are making $100 million a year in profits, and you can't kick any more money back over to us over in the operations. What is going on here? And then I got to start working with a lot of those people, and I realized they're on the road all the time. They're whining and dining them. And when this really set in was when we were dealing with a contract that was almost 8 figures a year in revenue for us. And the person who was that decision maker said, you know what? We're actually going with a competitor because when this guy got replaced, your new guy, this is the first time we've seen you, and it's at a sales meeting. So sorry, guys, we're out of here. And they went to a competitor literally across the street from our home office. And, that's really painful when you hear that. So I'm like, okay, yeah, we just lost about $9 million in revenue per year. And that also affects all the downstream people that were servicing the account. All the jobs got put in jeopardy. That's a big issue, right? And so those people who are building relationships deserve what they get if they do it really well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because the salespeople are oftentimes the people who get them into the door first, but also they're there on a reoccurring type of basis, like you said, to not necessarily to wine and dine them, but to use that phrase, to wine and dine them, so to make sure
Mhm.
that you stay
Make them feel
relevant.
special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. To make sure you stay relevant and on the forefront of their mind, and they're there calling them and say, "Hey, do you guys need anything? We're just here, and this is this new thing that we implemented. How do you need any information?" All of that stuff is directly related back to the salespeople. So you're right. The salespeople really are the driving force behind the business's success or failure, because they are the ones that are beating the payment, doing the work, so that the company can have that sustained client.
Yeah. And you never want to leave the door open for competition to come in, right? It takes a long time, especially when you're talking about a multi 7-figure, 8-figure contract. It takes a long time to win that over. And generally, when a company makes that type of commitment, they're not ready to change anytime soon. So you feel pretty good. And that's when companies get lazy, apathetic again. They rest on their laurels, like, we won the contract. They're happy, no big deal. And before you know it, the competitors are knocking on the door saying, "Oh, but did you know about this? Did you know about this? Hey, let me take you out here." And somebody who's hungrier than you will come in and eventually take it if you do not continue to make these people feel special, right? And that's it's a really a big challenge in business, because every business owner, every marketer, every entrepreneur out there is trying to grow their business by looking at what the next thing is, right? And that's important. You need that visionary. You need that person who's always looking at what the next thing is, but you've got to have somebody who can take care of those people. And when that person that, whether it's a client, whether it's an investor, a stakeholder of any kind, a vendor even, if that person's important enough to your business, you better dang well make sure they're happy. I had a client a long time ago who supplied all of the wings and the wing material for Boeing airplanes, right? That was 80% of their revenue. You could bet they were doing a good job of taking care of Boeing, because if they didn't, 80% of their revenue gone overnight. We're talking like multi-million-dollar manufacturing lines, and they had several of them. That's a really important process. That one person inside of your company is very, very vital if it is one person that's taking care of them. And you better make sure you're always training the replacement for that person too.
Yeah, and okay. So speaking of training a replacement, that's interesting, because you said that you had a salesperson, they left, and a new person came in, first time meeting the client. Whoa, we're done with this. Training that replacement is interesting, because it's like you want to invest as much as you can into the person that's there right now doing the job, but you also have to acknowledge on some point, on some level, that person isn't going to be there forever with you. So you have to have somebody that's there, on standby, sort of say, learning, growing a little bit of what they're doing. So there's some back and forth there, which is challenging from a business management perspective, to put all your eggs in one basket with this salesperson, but then have another salesperson, or two or three, depending on how big the clients are that they're managing, they're ready in the wings to take over for them. And for that transition process for the clients, so that they don't see that as a harsh change because that person changed, and the way that they interact is different because there's a different person. But also that secondary person has to, they don't want to have to feel like they have to be shaped and molded to be a carbon copy of that first person, because they're their own like there's all sorts of intricacies to that.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, right? A lot of it's going to come down to culture, which you've built inside a company. And if you've built the right culture and you have core values and you have principles, you're going to attract, hopefully, the right people into that company, right? And hopefully you have a screening process to make sure that the people that come into your company are a good fit for you, for your clients, and all of that. And that should, it doesn't always, of course, but it should help to alleviate the situation of differing personalities when you're trying to do that handoff. And secondly, we'll go from the small end to the very, very big end, right? On the small end, you might have a single doctor's office, right? A chiropractor, maybe a dentist, maybe it's a physical therapist. Well, as quickly as that person can, they need to replace themselves in all aspects besides hands-on patients, right? Once they are in that position where they're hands-on patient, that means they have somebody who's doing billing, somebody who's doing scheduling, somebody who's doing, maybe it's front desk, and maybe that front desk person is doing all of those things at first. But you can't risk your business on one. The worst number in any business is one of anything, right? one vendor, one stakeholder that's supplying you materials, one provider, one person's doing the sales. So you have to find a way to add to that. So in a small business, you might have people cross training on jobs. And if part of that job is interacting with that patient, that client that's coming in the door, they at least need to be seen. Maybe they don't have to take every single inbound call or talk to every person walking through the door, but they have to be seen. And they do have to do some interaction. On the highest level, when you're talking about a Fortune 500 business, you absolutely have sales teams and account management teams. You don't just have one person. You have one person who is responsible for that and responsible for that relationship and making sure it's happening. But you always have a team of people, and those people also need to be seen as well. Sometimes it's better seen than not heard when they're early on, right? Let them learn a little bit by just being a fly on the wall. But as they scale and as your company grows, you need to make sure you have more of those people so they can step in, because you never know. Somebody might need to take maternity leave. They might get hit by a bus. We never know. And so you don't want to risk all of what you built on, not having that contingency plan.
Yeah, I was going to say, like you just did, it ties back into one of the big main ideas, which is planning. If you're planning for having a replacement, planning for growth, planning for scaling, you're setting in those redundancies and contingency plans for things that might happen. And so this is something you've already touched on that we can see practical examples of and how it's effective and useful in companies big or small.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. It's vital. It's vital for your long-term growth and success. And for whether you're a solo entrepreneur or you're a multinational CEO, it's imperative to have those types of things in place for your own peace of mind, right? Because when I talk to clients and I'm consulting or advising entrepreneurs and CEOs, we get to what keeps you up at night. And the thing that keeps them up at night is their business is not necessarily going to outlast them, right? And then you dive even deeper, and it's that exact issue, right? Do I know that there's somebody else who is taking care of these problems so I don't have to worry about them? And when you know without a shadow of a doubt that somebody else is going to handle this problem if something comes up, man, that alleviates so many stressful things in any business owner, entrepreneur's life.
So speaking on scaling business, of course, that's what a tough task that is. And I'm just curious, do you have any strategies that are essential for businesses looking to scale to achieve exponential growth?
Yeah, it's always this teeter-totter effect, right? If you think about a teeter-totter, we're always going back and forth like this. And a lot of companies, when they're very, very early on, will be really good at one of two things. They'll either be good at the widget making, the doing of the thing, the service, like you think about the chiropractor. We'll just use that as an example. A chiropractor who is really, really great at hands-on patients. They are probably not very, very good at the sales thing, right? And sales only happens if you have a really good inbound lead generation, or you have a good way of getting people in. So there's sales, marketing, and operations, right? And when you combine all these three things together in a nice little Venn diagram, right there in the middle is where you want to be. When you get to this point where you have this really, really great sales team, right? And they can sell and sell and sell all day long. That's wonderful, right? Everybody thinks that's the best thing. That's all exactly what you need. But going back to what we said earlier, if you don't have a good service delivery mechanism, if you don't have a great quality assurance program for your products or technology, you don't have customer support on the back end, all of a sudden the operations is lagging behind sales. And that can be just as detrimental as not having any sales at all, because now you get refunds and chargebacks and all that. Ask me how I know, right? Not a lot of fun. On the other hand, a lot of businesses will start with this incredible ability to perform and to be operators, but they don't have sales. So this teeter-totter effect is what ends up happening. In our world of hyper-growth companies, when there's this mass infusion of capital, there is a huge incentive to just drive sales and get more marketing going. And most people don't realize the problems and challenges that come with that, right? Anything from just as simple as not enough server space. We didn't build our tech stack in a way that was scalable to the level that we need, to our cost per acquisition is not actually very good. And our customer lifetime value is not really where we thought it was. And now our retention, our turnover is going up and our retention is going down. Like those are really big issues, right? So you can dump a lot of, gas on the fire, if you will, when it comes to marketing and sales. But if you don't have a way to keep those people happy and keep them coming back, you're not going to scale. On the other hand, if you don't have any money coming in because you don't have enough sales or you weren't able to raise capital and you're really great at the operations, you got to get that imbalance fixed too. So we try to take a holistic approach at that and look into where are we potentially blind? And that's where bringing in that outside objective person. Where are we blind to our limitations here? And a lot of clients will get us and they'll bring us in like, hey, we need so much help with marketing and we need more sales. We need to drive sales. I'll give you a really good example. We had this tech company up in Canada and brought us in, needed help with sales, wanted marketing done. Great. And we get in, very first month, we start driving traffic, everything breaks, right? You know, the website's broken, the CRM's not connected to this, customers are unhappy, they're not getting their emails. Okay, pause. We got to go back and fix this. As we're going back and fixing it, we realize there's all these other operational challenges. Like, oh, there's all these dependencies of the technology that we weren't aware of. We got to go back and fix this, right? So it's really understanding what those bottlenecks are inside of your business to help it grow. And once you've understood those, if anybody's ever watched or read the book, The Goal, understanding throughput and lean manufacturing, lean processes is really important. Theory of constraints is the big thing. What is the constraint in the business? Keep it back from sales. And sometimes the constraint is completely hidden because they haven't gotten there yet, right? They haven't gotten to a point where the inbound customer support tickets are outpacing one person's ability to handle them all. And so it's trying to identify what those constraints are in a business before they become a problem.
And I guess part of once you've established what the constraint is, then you have to build a system that facilitates the improvement of that, whatever the issue is. And then once that system is built, then you have to train and educate the team on how to implement that so that doesn't become an issue moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. And you might liken it like we call it throughput because, of course, you have raw material on one end and you have finished product on the other end and customers on the other end, right? But if you think about a pipe, right, and you are trying to push a massive amount of water through this pipe because you're getting water to a residential, development, and there's all these houses that need potable water and they need all this fresh water. That's great. And the pipe is built and designed to provide all that. Well, if all of a sudden somebody goes in, they start building all these other houses on the back end, right? And now all of a sudden, like we could think of that as like the sales. Now the water needs to get through. The water is the ability for us to perform, but the pipe wasn't big enough to get to all those people. That's a constraint, right? Now we have to figure, okay, now we either have to put a second pipe in, we have to reroute a pipe, we have to expand the pipe, whatever we need to do. And so building that system and understanding what it's going to take to get to that next level is really important. And building the processes is vital. But even more important is the training around those processes, right? Because again, going back to what we were saying earlier, if your team doesn't understand what's necessary to keep the customer happy, doesn't matter if you built the system or built the process if you don't have the people trained on it. And we would all love to think, and I love this too, is technology, automation, systems is going to handle everything. And the fact is that there's still a human component, right? Until AI has taken over everything and then just made us the workers, we can't really rely on that. We have to rely on people. And so there has to be that other component of your business as well.
So I'm curious, as you're talking about building these processes, how would you go about fixing an issue by implementing processes or a system that would be needed to facilitate that change?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's actually easier said than done, right? And I'll give you a really good example. So we send out millions and millions of emails, and over time, email service providers will change things on us, and there's these big issues that will happen as a result of those big things happening. Your emails stop going to the inbox; they start going to promotional, or eventually they go to spam. And how do you fix all that? And I had that happen to me. And I relied on people that were supposed experts in this area for a long time to solve this problem, and they could not solve it. And we're like, okay, so me just being, again, a technical, geeky kind of guy, I dove into it. And I've spent a year learning this stuff and figuring it all out. And I can't even find help articles on some of the stuff that I'm trying to fix, right? So when we finally figured it out, I was like, okay, now we found what the problem was. Let's document that process. For us, it's through video, right? So I'll do a Loom video, for example, and I will say, all right, I'm going to take this video. I'm going to walk through step by step by step by step. I then take that video. I hand it over to my operations manager. She turns that into a process, right? So now we have a document that's created. We have the videos broken down. We have our video editor kind of make it nice. It gets put into a learning management system, essentially. And then we also do live training with the team who's going to be helping us with that. So now we're going to go through and train them because there's going to be questions they're going to have because there are certain things, because I'm in the weeds, I just knew to do this. And they might have the question, well, why'd you? Oh, it's a good question. Let's go back and add that in. And so now you've built out a process that is 80 to 90% of the way done. And the only reason it's not 100% of the way done is because you haven't field tested it with somebody who doesn't know this stuff. Once you field test it, then you find out, does the process work the right way, and can somebody else replicate that? So it comes down to the expert understanding it and then the expert getting it out of their head into some sort of digestible format, and then other people testing it for you.
Well, yeah, I'm curious because your story reflects resilience and tenacity, and I'm curious, how do you maintain an entrepreneurial a spirit in face of the challenges, and then perhaps what advice can you offer other aspiring entrepreneurs in that regard?
Yeah, my wife was kind of joking about that. It's like I like the challenge, right? The challenge is sometimes what drives me. That's unfortunate sometimes because it'd be nice to be able to just kind of kick back and relax. You take a few weeks off, but like when I got out of the Navy in '06, it's like, all right, I got enough money stored up. I'm going to take a few months off, just figure out what I want to do in life. I got so bored after 2 weeks of sitting by a pool in the sunshine that I had a job, 2 weeks after getting out. So, for me, it's really about that challenge is something that drives me. Like I like figuring stuff out. I like having something completed. I like getting results of something, whatever that something is, at that moment. And that feeling of getting something there is really, really great for me. But over time that changes, right? So now it's not the feeling of, okay, did I figure out how to, put this nut and bolt together or build this stupid thing from IKEA that no one can really understand the directions anyway. And you have to take it about 3 times before you finally get it to put together the right way. Right. That's not the part that fulfills me more. Now it's seeing a company growing and scaling, and it's seeing that they're making a difference in the world. And they're changing things. And for me, that allows me to then constantly refocus my energies on those entrepreneurs that are growing and scaling and getting to that level and helping them. And most of the time, they have the same problem everybody else does, but whether it's mostly between their ears, right? But the nice thing about it is that the innovation and the ideas that they're bringing to me keep me kind of in the loop of what's happening in the world, keep me in the loop of what's happening technologically. I joke with people that every single time we hold an event, I think I've seen it all, and then I'm always have my mind blown. There's something new that I've seen that I've never even considered, right? And I'm talking stuff like Star Trek, right? Like that kind of level of technology that most of us like, yeah, it'll never happen. It's like, no, some of it is happening. It's pretty incredible. And so for me, it's that always getting to feel like a kid learning something new, but still having the wisdom and experience of an adult that's done a lot of things to be able to help, right? Not just sitting on the sidelines and watching and saying, oh, that looks really cool, but actually sitting on the sidelines, watching it, and then being called in to help out and fix something that's actually a really big problem.
Right. So I can imagine you take all this new information that you see, all this wild, creative innovations, and then you can apply that into your mindset of all of the experiences that you've had before and think, okay, where can I implement this cool, new, creative thing so that it can help all these people and not in really in turn help yourself and having that kind of connection to your clients so that you are getting and receiving the not benefit, but pleasure, sort of say, for lack of a better term, from them succeeding in their realm.
Yeah, well, it's them succeeding is a really big thing, but it's also fulfilling, right? And I think that just the human condition in general is that we all, at some level, we all do fall on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And once you've got those base couple of layers covered, then the rest of it is what's going to make me feel important, what's going to make me feel significant in our lives. And I think that's a part where a lot of people struggle, right? You look at the celebrities, the athletes that have made all the money in the world, and all of a sudden they're doing drugs and they're losing their life. And like at one point, I think Mike Tyson made, I don't know, it was like $30 million or something like that for his 3-second knockout or something ridiculous. I can't remember the exact numbers, but and ends up going bankrupt. And we're like, how in the world does a guy that made that much money go bankrupt? And he has struggled, right? He admits that he had issues. And why is that? Well, if you were to dive deep, if you go like down the Freudian realm or Jordan Peterson kind of thing, it's probably because they didn't feel valuable anymore. They've lost purpose. And for me, this is a way to kind of maintain that, right? Getting to see and help the next generation of entrepreneurs, the next generation of technologists, of innovators, of people who are way smarter than me in a lot of things, but don't have that key skill and knowledge that I have that can really help them. And so it's me being able to give back in a way that's, beneficial for me, beneficial for them, and ultimately beneficial for society.
Well, it sounds like you've done an excellent job in that. And you talked about technology, and it seems like you've been an advocate for free speech amidst the challenges from big tech. I'm curious, how do you think entrepreneurs can navigate the landscape of digital platforms while still maintaining their own voice?
That's such a pressing and challenging question to answer. I have my opinions, of course, right? And my opinion is that your tribe is where, they should be. And for people like me, my tribe is not necessarily on the big social media platforms. Like if I'm working with a CEO of a nine-figure business, they're not sitting there scrolling social media all day, every day, looking for the next latest trend on TikTok, right? They don't care about that. They're probably not even looking at LinkedIn, right? And I hate to say it, but a lot of people on LinkedIn are out there just hustling and trying to get the next deal, or hey, look at me, this is really awesome, right? So my tribe is the person that has more of that militaristic mindset, and they are wanting to make a difference. They're wanting to grow. They have the discipline and they're motivated. Well, where are they going? They're going to the conferences where they're going to learn something very, very valuable to them. Maybe they're going to something that's a trade show for their industry. Maybe they are at the country club or something like that, winding up. And so for me, it's understanding where my tribe is. And if your tribe is on social media and it is out there and you need to get your voice out and heard in a number of different ways, the best thing you can do is be authentic, right? And being authentic does come with risks. It means that you are going to offend people. One of my early mentors said, if you haven't offended somebody by noon, you're not trying hard enough. And I have found that to be incredibly true, right? Because what are we trying to do when we're building our brand, our personal brand, our business brand? What are we really trying to do? We're trying to attract our ideal people to us and repel everybody else, right? That's what we're trying to do. So if a social media platform shuts you down, there are alternatives, right? There's ways around that. Whether it's Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok or LinkedIn or Instagram, or now you got Getter and Truth Social and Rumble. There's ways to get your message out there. And you have to realize that the people you're trying to attract are probably on the platform that you should be on, and you need to figure out what that is. And sometimes that's being in person. It's not even being on social media.
Well, so that's interesting because you mentioned Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has such a wild back and forth for people. People seem to really, really like him, and people are really put off by him. But so a little bit of background about us: we're martial arts instructors, and one of a phrase that we have in martial arts is what it means to be being a leader. Which is being a leader means having the courage to take a stand for what you truly believe in, despite what others may say or believe. It also means living your life with compassion for others and assisting them in doing the same through your actions and words. And, speaking about Jordan Peterson, it seems like that really sums up what he is about. And, if you're on social media and you're getting, people are upset about you, being a leader means having the courage to take a stand for what you truly believe in, despite what others may say or believe. And even know that you're doing this and people are upset or disappointed or whatever that you are offering to them, don't be discouraged by the people that are naysayers. And I think you're right, trying to find the right platform that isn't going to, kick you off or whatever, because that very likely is where your tribe is going to live. And if you can communicate directly to them, then you have that kind of direct line of communication right to the people who you want to be communicating with anyways. But finding that is tough and sometimes incredibly discouraging, because you do something, you put it up there and you're like, oh man, all these people, and you have to find your way. And lots of times they do that and they let that discourage them and they stop in their tracks. They don't go any further.
They do. And why is that, right? Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because that is how most people are. They can't stand the criticism. And I will tell you, the number one thing that every person who wants to succeed in life needs to get good at is being immune to criticism. Because if you let every little dagger that somebody throws at you stop you, slow you down, prevent you from doing the next thing. And I have had this, right? And it hurts, right? When you have these people like vehemently attacking you for your beliefs and your positions. It took me a while to realize these people don't matter, right? They're not my people. And so I want to answer your other piece of that, which is how do you find that tribe and how do you get those people? I run a digital transformation marketing company. So this might come really as a shocker to a lot of people, but I think the direct mail and being on a stage and in person are going to be the best ways for most people to grow any sort of brand, right? And the reason I believe that is, one, your direct mail is generally not censored. I mean, unless you are doing something like it completely over the top illegal, then you probably should get in trouble for it. But most people are not. They're just trying to get their message heard. And what other people don't realize, and it's really scary to them to see their eyes do this thing when they finally come to grips with this, which is those little devices that we're carrying around all the time, they are capturing more information about you than anybody could possibly imagine. And again, I work in a marketing agency, and so I know how to find, if I want to go and I want to target people who have own a firearm, who vote Republican, who are in this zip code at this time and have gone and visited this location within the past 90 days, I can do that. And then I can take that information. I can figure out roughly how much money do they have, where do they live, how much equity is in their home. I can figure out what kind of car they drive, how long they've owned that car. I can figure out what kind of subscriptions they subscribe to, what kind of newsletters they're buying, what kind of websites they go to and they frequent. Do they buy stuff on e-commerce? Like, I can find out more information about anybody I want to than should really be allowed, right? But if I were to say, and this is why every guru in marketing says you need to figure out who your avatar is, who is your ideal client, who is your buyer persona, what is that? And most people go about that deep on it. They go surface level, right? And this is a challenge, right? I don't have a single industry I serve. I've literally been in thousands, right? I've done everything from clean atmosphere, controlled atmosphere environments, to perishable goods, to rendering plants and so on. And for those of you who don't know what those are, go look them up later. But don't eat lunch first. And I know that I can help out in a lot of different industries because a lot of these principles apply across industries. So who am I really looking for if I'm not looking for the CEO of XYZ type of manufacturing company? I'm looking for my people, right? I'm looking for my people that believe in freedom, believe in autonomy, believe in the First and Second Amendment. I'm looking for the people that want to succeed, that are motivated, that are disciplined. And so how do I find them? Well, I can do the shotgun approach and just put a whole bunch of stuff out there on Facebook and social media and do it. And that's kind of what we're doing here, right? We did tailor who we reach out to for podcasts so that I know that I'm going on good ones. But you can also do that laser targeted approach and say, okay, these are the psychographics I want to go after. So demographics, psychographic, whatever we can go after, build my list that way, and then figure out where are those people, what kind of information they consume, and so on. Really good example. One gentleman I know only works with, he's a wealth manager, only works with people who've sold their business, the sole owner who have sold their business for $10 million or more. Almost the only place this guy advertises is in magazines that are on private jets, right? He doesn't advertise in almost anything else. And he has more business than he knows what to do with, right? So it's a matter of figuring out who do you serve, where are they, and then how do you get in front of them? And that's, if you want to drill down to the most simplistic form.
Well, yeah, and what like factionable, helpful information that is too. And you talk about your tribe and finding your tribe, and I think, and again, to bring back to Jordan Peterson, I've heard him say this before: is if you are in the light and people are canceling you or trying to cancel you or whatever. And he talked about one of the biggest things that you can do that would be detrimental for you is apologize. Because what happens then is the people are, group A is mad at you because you said or did X. But likely your tribe, your people like you because you did or said X, because that's what they were feeling anyways. And you had the tenacity to go and say it. But if you apologize for it, then you already disrupted or made the first group mad at you, but then you're going to go back and make the other people mad at you because you apologize for it. Because if it was something that you said or believed and you did it, then stand by that decision that you made. And what that'll do is that'll in turn increase that connection to your tribe, because it's almost like you double down on it. Like, yeah, no, this is actually what I said and meant, and that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry you guys don't like it, but and that will drive people to you because you stood by what you did.
100%, right? And it's really hard for a lot of people to believe that, because we've been raised in a society where you shouldn't say and do mean things to people. And I'm not saying you should, right? But like you guys said, in the martial arts world, you're teaching respect, you're teaching discipline, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with everything everybody else is doing, right? I can respect you as a human being for having your opinions or belief, but there are sometimes I may completely disagree with that. And it is 100% okay for me to say what my thoughts, my beliefs, my opinions are, right? Because I'm not verbally attacking somebody when I'm doing that. It's just that people make you feel like they are, like you are, right? And that's kind of a weird society that we live in. But what I love what you just said, because that brings to my mind, which is the saying, which is unapologetically authentic. And you just, you have to be who you are. And we spend so much time, energy, and parts of our lives trying to fit in to a society that honestly a lot of us don't even love, right? We're just trying to be accepted because that's what we've been told to do. When we finally shed that veneer, we can then look at it and say, oh, this feels so much better, right? Like I hang out, my best friends are still the guys I went into the service with 20 plus years ago. And when we hang out, it's a different type of hanging out than hanging out with anybody in my business seminars or my companies or not like that, because we can be unapologetically authentic. We can say whatever's on our mind, and none of us are going to get offended by each other.
Jeff, hey, I gotta say, your insights have been incredibly valuable. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. And before we wrap up, I'm curious, do you have any key thoughts or final takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I just really appreciate this. I think that a lot of what we've said here and what we've talked about is going to be pertinent to anybody on any journey in their life. But being true to yourself and figuring out where you want to go in life is so, yeah, it's incredibly important. It's very underrated, and most people don't even give it enough justice. And we just start walking down whatever path is in front of us without even thinking about where it's going. And a lot of people will then realize that they become this inauthentic version of themselves if they've gone down that path for too long. And having to change that later in life is really, really challenging, right? And so I would say that for anybody who's listening to this, figure out where you want to go and who you really are before you actually start going down that path.
Well, Jeff, thank you again. And I'm just curious, if our listeners wanted to learn more about you or to get in contact with you, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, best place is angelinvestorsnetwork.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and so I get on there, and so people can message me and connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, Angel Investors Network is the best place to find us and find our upcoming events and where we're going and doing things.
Thank you. To our listeners, I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring and enlightening as I did. Remember, success is not just about overcoming challenges. It's about the resilience and determination to keep moving forward. Until next time, stay inspired and keep striving for greatness.